Welcome back. You're watching The Globe. Now, the leaders of Russia and China have met in Beijing ahead of the opening ceremony of the Olympic Games. Vladimir Putin told Xi Jinping that the two countries had established an unprecedented relationship. He said that Russia was prepared to supply China with more oil and gas. It's thought that Putin will be looking for diplomatic support as he builds up troops on Russia's border with Ukraine.
Russia's relations with the West may be strained, but in the East they are flourishing. Russian President Vladimir Putin and his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping met for talks in Beijing on Friday, where they pledged support for one another. The pair issued a joint statement calling for NATO to halt its expansion, a further sign of the deepening of the relationship between the two neighbours. The joint statement included harsh criticism of the United States. It said Russia and China opposed further enlargement of US-led NATO and called on the alliance to abandon its ideologized Cold War approaches. A halt to NATO's eastward addition of new member states is a key demand of the Kremlin in its standoff with the West over Ukraine. The Kremlin said the talks were warm and substantive, describing their relationship as an advanced partnership with a special character.
As for our bilateral relations, they are developing linearly with the spirit of friendship and strategic partnership and have reached an unprecedented level. They are an example of upstanding relations which help both sides to develop and support each other at the same time.
Putin, who is in Beijing to attend the Winter Olympics, also unveiled a new major gas deal with China, reducing its dependence on its traditional European energy customers. The joint statement also said Moscow fully supported Beijing's stance on Taiwan and opposed Taiwanese independence in any form. Chinese state media reported Xi said China and Russia would resolutely support each other in defending core interests and would deepen strategic cooperation. Xi also said China-Russia strategic cooperation was unshakable, past, present and future.
Well, for some analysis, we're now joined by Petro Burkovskiy, who's a fellow at the Kyiv-based Democratic Initiatives Foundation. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. Good to have you on the program again.
Good evening, my pleasure.
So Russia and China coming together in this way, I suppose for some it might be more symbolism than anything else. At one stage, they shared communism. What does China and Russia share in 2022?
Well, first of all, and they do not make a secret of this, they share a common competitor, which right now Russia says that it's almost an enemy, and I'm speaking about the United States. So both states, Russia and China, see the United States influence and the United States power as an obstacle on their way for China to become a great power and for Russia to regain the status of great power. And when I'm saying this, the great power, I mean that that their decisions would be respected and will be valued by the United States, and that the United States would recognize that China has an exclusive sphere of influence in Pacific region, and that Russia has an exclusive sphere of interest in Europe, including Ukraine. However, as we know, there are other countries in the Pacific and in Europe who doesn't want to belong to the exclusive sphere of influence either of China or of Russia, and that creates tensions in the international relations, of course.
So we understand why Russia is opposed to the expansion of NATO. What's in it for China to support Russia's stance on the expansion of NATO? Is it oil and gas or other kickbacks?
Well, right now we have to remember about the fundamentals of Chinese diplomacy. And these fundamentals is that from the very early ages, from the very early beginning of the Chinese statehood 1,000 years ago, they decided that they would not interfere into the conflicts unless they are sure that they will prevail and that way they will win without using military force. So the core interest of China is to turn Russia into the kind of ally that would not behave independently, but that will behave to pursue the interests of China. In other words, China is looking for the partners that would achieve goals without direct Chinese interference. From this point of view, when Russia tries to intimidate American allies in Europe, it attracts a lot of American attention and a lot of American resources. And since these resources are limited, they cannot be put to the Indo-Pacific region, and that makes China, it makes easier for China to achieve goals in the Indo-Pacific region. So, in other words, China tries to use Russia as a counterbalance and as an agent that would attract more and more American power and American attention.
China has been quite strategic with all of its relationships across the world, including here in Africa. I just wonder who needs this relationship more, China or Russia? Russia used to be this massive superpower, not as powerful in the modern day, whilst China continues to rise with its power and its presence. So I suppose for Russia, maybe, this is a guess, they really need to have a friend like China.
Yes, you are completely right. And in my opinion, in case of China, we have an extending power, a state, a power that will bring challenge to the United States, while Russia is a descending power, a declining power, and it tries just to cling to its current status, and it tries to slow down the process of decline. But if we speak about Africa, and I think your audience is interested about Africa, in Africa, for instance, as far as I see, China and Russia has competing interests. We see that Russia is sending its mercenaries to the sub-Saharan Africa, to Mali, to the Central African Republic, and it intrudes into the domestic politics and into the domestic conflicts in these areas, while China tries to move its interests through the economic diplomacy and through investments. And as you know, money likes silence, and money likes peace. While what Russia is doing, it steers more and more conflict. And from this point of view, I think that, for instance, in Africa, this interest between Russia and China would come into the conflict. But let's see how the things will develop.
Has China got enough influence to perhaps talk to Vladimir Putin and say, look, Ukraine is not worth the headache, do not invade?
Well, I don't think that the Chinese would advise anything to Vladimir Putin on what Russia thinks it's an exclusive sphere of interest. However, I think that Chinese would like to know whether Russia is really serious about the conflict, because also I will explain to your respected audience that China exports a lot of grain from Ukraine. And this year, China has become the top importer of Ukrainian corn and of Ukrainian grain. And this is the matter of domestic stability for China, to have diversified and stable supply of food to its internal market. And if Russia destabilizes and starts the invasion, it will increase prices for food and for grain globally, because both Russia and Ukraine are global players on the grain market, and it will increase domestic prices for China. And for China, growing prices for food is an issue of domestic security and of domestic stability. Therefore, they will try to persuade, or will try to get guarantees from Putin that conflict would not disrupt supply of grain and corn from Ukraine to China. And if it's the fact, then it constrains seriously the actions of Putin in Ukraine. So maybe they will try to constrain Putin about and they will ask Putin not to invade Ukraine for now.
So very real and practical implications, but I just wonder, a conflict full-on between Russia and Ukraine would bring some instability to the region generally. And I guess this isn't something that China would need to be looking at, even though that they might be at a distance.
Well, I think that Chinese are really concerned about the possible scale of the Western sanctions. While Putin is saying that if Russia will be cut off, that if Russia is cut off from the trade in dollars or in dollars in the American currency, they would swap and would switch to the Chinese currency. However, the global trade in any case is in dollars, and I think Chinese are trying to avoid becoming a mediator between the Russian economy and the global economy, because from that perspective, their also financial institutions would fall under the sanctions, and they will try to avoid. So right now, I think that everybody wants to de-escalate because it can harm the economic interests, and for China right now, the economic interests are the most important.
Joe Biden is watching this meeting taking place from the White House. Is there anything for him to worry about, or it's the same kind of noise just in one place?
No, I think that Americans are concerned that when we see the rapprochement between China and Russia, this increasing cooperation, but most of all, Americans are concerned about possible transfer of very sensitive defense technologies from Russia to China. The technologies that connected to the cruise missiles and to hypersonic missiles. And I think that Russia right now would think that if they want to become an exclusive and the most valued partner of China, they would have to transfer this technology. But as far as they transfer technology to China, they then will become a less valuable partner to China. So for both America and for Russia, it's a brinkmanship of moving closer or taking a more distant approach to China, because neither side, neither America nor Russia, would like to become more dependent on China. So really. Let's see. It's very interesting. The development would be very interesting in the next months or even years.
All right, very interesting times for sure. Thank you so much indeed for joining us. Your insights greatly appreciated. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.